Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the panel that will be talking about Still Right Here. Probably most of you in the room have read this already. If you haven't, you'll want to read it after this panel discussion. And we have all of the people featured in the book right here. How cool is that? Where else can you read a book, laugh and cry as you read the stories of the people in it? Have those questions come to your mind. Oh, I wish I could ask them this. I wonder about this. And then here they are. You can do that. So we're really excited about that. And I have to throw in a God wink I saw when I read this for the third time. I thought I better make sure I remember a lot of the details. And I laughed, and I got the tissues, and I cried again. But this grabbed me. This was a God wink. What's today's date? April 15th. And Suzanne is describing the first time ever that she made contact with Elizabeth. And I'll go through the names in a minute. And Irene had been telling Suzanne about this wonderful lady, Elizabeth, and helping parents heal. And when Ty and Suzanne are out in the Phoenix area or Arizona, they should make sure and call Elizabeth. So Suzanne, they're driving in the big RV, and Suzanne starts to dial her phone, and the phone rings. Guess who's on the other end? Elizabeth. And they decide they're going to get together. And Suzanne says, let me look at my calendar and see what day it is, and we'll take it from there. Exactly 2 years ago today, it was April 15th. Oh, I will. I had to get that all in before I made introductions. But I'm Bev Garlup, Suzanne's assistant. And what an adventure that is. And the folks you'll recognize here from the book, of course, are Suzanne and Ty Giesemann, Cyril and Elizabeth Boisson, LeAnn Hull, Irene and Tony Vouvalides, and Lynn and Jeff Hollahan. And I'm sorry.
We got Hollahan.
And
she might have trouble with the Greek, Vouvalides.
Okay, did I say Vouvalides? Okay, more Spanish on there. All right. And of course, these are the parents, the Shining Light parents, who are featured in Still Right Here and have healed so many hearts with sharing their experience. So today, and of course, those who were right here just jumping up with excitement and have been bugging us all morning to get going are the kids who brought this whole thing together anyway. Morgan and Chelsea, Devin, Carly, Susan, and Andy are all here with probably lots of friends just filling the room. I know there's a lot of others here. So I'm going to start with a question for the whole panel. We'll just go up and down as they want to answer. And then, of course, we'll open the questions up to you. And only two little rules. We ask that you keep your questions general, things that would help the whole group, and not a very, very specific question about your situation or your child. And also keep it to questions. I know we like to share, we love to share our experience, but we do want to keep it short and concise questions, and so the panel can address as many of you as possible. So to kick it off, I open this to the whole panel. Maybe I'll point to somebody to start. Obviously, all of these folks have been through the depth of grief, raw grief, and here they are at a point where their lives are not only filled with joy, but they have a mission, a passion to help others reach that same point. But I'd like you to describe the moment that you knew you turned the corner, that all of a sudden there were some rays of hope, and you thought, I can do this, I can do this. Irene and Tony, should we start with you?
So you're talking about the journey, not the trip. We're talking about the journey.
The journey of the grief journey from grief to hope, to knowing.
Well, it involves Suzanne. The day I had the reading with her, and I spoke to Carly that morning, and I held my signed copy of George Anderson's book, Walking in the Garden of Souls, which I called my Bible, and I said to Carly, if you are here, please have this book mentioned in my reading with Suzanne. And Suzanne went on to say, Carly, your daughter's telling me that you're holding a book, and it's a signed book, and I'm an author, and I've signed many books, and an author signs the book on the right side, but this book is signed on the left side as well as on the right side, and the book was. George Anderson signed the book on one side saying, to Carly in the hereafter, and the other he wrote the Lord's Prayer in Latin. So once that happened, it was there. Carly was here. So that's what changed in my journey.
Thanks, Irene.
That's a tough question. Looking back now, Irene, after Carly had passed, we were walking down the hospital corridor, and she said, I don't want to live. And I had lost my first wife to pancreatic cancer, and I said to Irene, I looked right at her, and I said, what about us? And there seemed to be a light in her eye, and she just stopped for a minute. And it was just, for me, watching her evolution from deepest, grief to a person that I could talk to again, and we had a connection again. It was difficult, and I don't know if I'm still over it.
Well, I don't know if I had one moment in particular. For me, the first couple months were kind of exciting for me, as weird as that sounds, because I was getting so many signs, and I couldn't wait to wake up in the morning and see what was going to happen to me that day. So the second year for me was the worst, but Jeff has an aha moment that he'd like to share.
Year about God moments. This was a duh moment, and we get a lot of those. And at the risk of repeating something that was in the book, the biggest deal for me was a basketball game. Lynn and our daughter had a lot of spirit things happen to them early on, and our son came to them noticeably multiple times, and I thought that was cool, but after a while it was happening to them and I wasn't getting anything, and I was feeling a little down and feeling a little left out. Devin passed in October of 2009, and November. And just prior to his passing, I had reached out to him. He was planning on coming home for the holidays. And I said, hey, I've got a line on some tickets to go see the Phoenix Suns play basketball, and here are the games that are available. Who do you want to go see? Well, the Cavaliers were coming with LeBron James. So he said, Cavs, 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 Cavs. That's who he wanted to see. So I got the tickets. And then he passed, and then I had these tickets that I really didn't want to use. But I used them anyway. And I had to be the worst date in the history of dates, of sporting events. I convinced my neighbor to go, and I don't know that I've ever sufficiently apologized for being a jerk that night. It was clear I didn't want to be there. We were sitting about 18 rows up, center court, great seats to watch a game, but not a great seat to catch a T-shirt because cheerleaders can't throw them that far. So as the game went on, I'm noticing that there's a father and a son sitting immediately in front of me, next row down, and the son was probably 7, and I'm watching them interact. And the kid didn't know anything about basketball, but his dad was great. He had convinced the son that his favorite player was Grant Hill, so every time Grant Hill did something great, he high-fived the son, and the son was going along for it, not really knowing what was happening. So I watched this, and it reminded me of the same experience that I had with our son when he was young. So the game goes on, and one thing that Devin always wanted to do when he was at the game was catch a T-shirt. And he'd go down low and, go down to close by and never got a T-shirt. So 3 minutes left in the game, there's a timeout, and the cheerleaders come out with the T-shirts. And of course, they can't get them up there. And I was saying, Devin, and I'm not going to be able to get through this without tearing up, so bear with me. I've never told this story without tearing up. I said, Devin, if you can figure out a way to get me a T-shirt, I want to give it to this kid. And at that moment, the Phoenix Suns mascot, the gorilla, came out with a compressed air cannon. He can get the T-shirts 18 rows up. So he does that thing. He points it to one side of the stadium, and everybody in that section stands up and cheers, and then he goes this way and that way. And the minute he turned the cannon in my direction, I had this otherworldly peace come over me, unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I knew at that moment that the first T-shirt that was coming out of that cannon was going to be right here. And it was right here. And I grabbed the T-shirt and I handed it to the kid, and his eyes got about this big around. And it was a magic moment for me, although it took me a little while to process what had just happened. I knew something special had happened. That night, I got home, it's about midnight, and I was jazzed. There was no way I was going to sleep. So I went into the bedroom, Lynn's asleep, and I woke her up and said, I need to tell you about what happened. So I told her the story, and she said, well, I've been talking to Devin all day. I told him to go to the game with you, so what else did you expect was going to happen? So that was probably the first of the multiple, what I call spiritual 2x4s, that smacked me upside the head to convince me that what we all are in the process of experiencing, what we've been talking about for the last 3 days, that this stuff is real. And that was kind of the, that was the moment for me.
Thank you, Jeff. Beautiful. Okay, Elizabeth and Cyril. And, LeAnn. We won't skip around. Okay, LeAnn.
Mine was, I was probably about 4 or 5 months along into the journey, and I was getting ready early in the morning, as I do. I'm an early bird, and I'm looking in the mirror, putting on makeup, doing my hair, which was the first step of validating that I wanted to move forward. And the music was playing. I'm a music person, so I always have music on wherever I go, whatever I do. And all of a sudden, I caught myself dancing. And I was moving to the music. And it was almost like an out-of-body experience where I'm watching myself in the mirror going, who is that dancing? And I realized it was me. And that I knew that it was super important for me to continue to validate and catch those moments of wanting to move forward and to live, and that I felt just such joy, and that was okay. It didn't mean that that moment was going to last forever, but I realized I could catch those moments, and the moments got closer and closer, and until they just became my life.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Cyril.
First of all, I'd just really like to thank Suzanne and Ty, but Suzanne especially. I can't believe that it's been 2 years only since I met Suzanne by telephone, and that she created this incredible book that honors all of our kids, but all of your kids as well, because this story is not just about them. It's about all of our kids. They're still right here. Every single one of them. And my moment is different from most people's moments, and I think you might have read about it in the book. It happened immediately when he passed at the base camp of Mount Everest. I was on the phone with him. I told him that we were proud of him, that we loved him, and not to be afraid. And it was a miracle. He hugged me. I felt him hugging me from the inside. He was not breathing. He was undergoing CPR. And I immediately knew that love never dies. It was something that was so profound in me. My husband was sitting next to me. he said, let me speak to him, because he thought that I was just having a normal conversation with him. And I said, no, honey, he's passed. He's gone. But at the same time, I knew he was with us. And so that was the first thing. The second thing was being able to connect with as many parents as possible who were on the same journey and who understood, because I felt at that moment that I was the only person in the world who had ever lost a child, and that there was nobody else that I'd never even heard of anyone losing a child or having a child transition, is what I like to say better. And being able to connect by Facebook 1 week later with many other parents was the hugest step that I could have taken in my healing journey, because we're all in this together, and all of our kids are still right here.
Thank you.
I think she said everything.
Thank you.
As a father, it's not easy also to mother, father to lost a kid. And when Morgan passed,
I think everyone knows without words, but yeah.
I'm very happy about this weekend with all this family. We are family here. We are family. And I had many connection after with my son, not at the beginning, because it was maybe a little bit close. And I have a beautiful story, one of many beautiful stories. If my English is not correct, I'm sorry, I am a US citizen. I was in a taxi because I work in Asia. I was in a taxi at 5:36 in the morning from Hong Kong, one side, to the airport. And I had the blues. I say, oh, Morgan, man. And before he passed, in the summer 2009, he recorded on his phone a song. I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. And this song started on the radio with my Hong Kongese taxi man. I said, oh, Morgan, thank you. Thank you to be with me, to be with your mom, your two sisters. And I didn't have a lot of connection because, as I say, I was not very open. I was like a stupid man, like a Saint Thomas. I believe what I can see now. I think often I go outside and I look the sky because we are lucky. Our two daughters gave us a present for Christmas one time. We have a star named Morgan. And I try to find my star. But normally I need to go at 2 a.m. Okay, but bless you, and I am very happy to be here with Elizabeth, and I'm lucky to have Elizabeth also.
Thank you so much.
The moment when I knew things would be okay after Susan passed was about a week after her funeral. And I had been hiking with Ty in the depths of depression thinking, Susan, do you really still exist? Because I didn't even know there was a spirit world, but I just knew that you couldn't kill the beautiful spirit, just like all of you know that. And so I'm hiking along thinking, okay, Susan, just appear to me on the trail. I was so naive at the time, I thought that that's how it worked. She would just show up if I was lucky enough. And that didn't happen, so I was feeling very dejected and got to the top of the trail thinking, maybe I'm just crazy to think they're still right here. And we turned around, and Ty was about 50 yards down the trail in front of me, and all of a sudden this flash of motion caught my eye, and it was this yellow butterfly that came out of nowhere, came up and flew around me in a complete circle, bounced into my heart, stunned me, and I watched it as it flew down the trail straight towards Ty. I yelled, "Ty!" And he turned around and it flew around him in a circle, bounced into his heart, and flew off. And that was the moment I said, there's more to this world than I'm aware of. So I knew somehow Susan was getting through to us through that butterfly, and the adventure began.
Suzanne mentioned hiking. We do a lot of hiking, as anybody who follows my blog knows. And the first few months were pretty bad. And in fact, we gave up our sailing adventure, put the boat in Turkey, and I went back to work for my mental health. And I tend to internalize, like a lot of guys. You know, you try to be stoic, and especially with the military background, you don't show your emotions. And so roll ahead a couple of years, and I'm hiking on a trail that, and Suzanne mentioned this, but it was such a life-changing event. And when I'm walking on a trail by myself that Susan and I had hiked before, and I feel the pressure on my arm turn, and there was no one there. Of course, it was Susan. And I don't often cry, but I sat down and really cried. And the journey all along with Suzanne, when she was on an up ramp, as we call it in the Navy, you know, of her skills as a medium, and I'm with this every day. So it was not an earth-shattering event to see her bring through spirits, because it happened slowly over the years. But the effect that she's had on so many people, including me, because I get to listen to these stories every day. And
His eyes glaze over sometimes.
no editorial comments here. But I'm naval officer, very left brain, you know, engineering, all that kind of stuff. So this did not come easily to me. But again, when I see the kind of evidence she brings through, it has brought me to a new place. And I've accepted Susan's transition as a positive thing, which is really hard for me to say. But she has helped so many people and is continuing to help us along this journey.
Thank you, Ty. We'll just hold that there. I have chills just hearing all the truths, and I know you all have your own, and can appreciate that. I want to point out, LeAnn was not on the boat with the other couples, but her experience living through the grief of a child ending his own life, and I know she has some things to share from her own experience and advice that you would give to others who have had to travel that journey. LeAnn.
Thank you. Yes, as I said, I'm the stepchild in the group. So I'm very honored to have been directed by Andy to guide Suzanne to ask me to share my story. So what an honor it is to be in her book, to have that voice for this particular kind of a journey, particular kind of a loss or transition, whatever you want to call it. And for me, the journey's been so much about the difference between my emotions and my decisions. That is made the difference for me, because we, on one hand, you know, I have an emotional response to my child not being here in the physical sense. And what do you do with that emotional response? And in particularly with suicide, there's so much guilt attached to it. What did I miss? What could I have done? What didn't I see? All of those things. And maybe it was guided divinely, maybe it was Andy, whatever it was, but I was definitely blessed with understanding really quickly that there's no point in asking why. It serves no purpose. The guilt serves no purpose. And so when people ask me, what do you do with the guilt? I don't address it. I don't deal with it. It's not important. it wouldn't change anything, and I focus on two things only. Whenever that little voice in the back of your head wants to say something negative or whatever, I say, I know without a doubt Andy knew that I loved him with every inch of my being. And I know without a doubt that he loved me with every inch of his being. That's all that matters. And so I don't address the guilt, and I move from an emotional level of being devastated or grieving or whatever you want to call it, to using a lot of different tools, coping tools, to move me to a positive action versus a passive reaction. I take charge of the journey.
Beautiful. Thank you. We've heard so much about the power of our choices. And we do have power over those choices. Okay, it's your turn. Raise your hand if you do have a question, and a hand went right up in the back here. And they will repeat the question so that you can hear it.
Christian faith. You're never supposed to see a movie review of the site for any number of things that they view as evil or evil. They're completely no-no within some organized religions. Have you separated your religion from your beliefs now? Do you practice still your Christianity?
I've blended them. So the question is, what did I do with my foundation of faith? And I came from a very evangelical Christian-based life. And so how did I reconcile my Christian beliefs with the, you are considered, to be sinning if you contact a medium or any of the afterlife or think about any of those things? Well, I knew, first of all, my faith, my beliefs, my traditional beliefs, we all knew that from that perspective that we go to heaven. That's where my kid was. But from that point of view, I was no longer, when our grandparents go to heaven, okay, we're comfortable with that. But when our child goes, I wanted to know what is heaven and what the heck is he doing? So it wasn't enough for me. So I had to do some of that in secret, because not only was I entrenched in those beliefs, but so was my sphere of friends and support system and family. So it was a shedding, and it was a long process of shedding religious confines. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in Jesus. That doesn't mean that I don't pray and that I'm not spiritual, but I have learned to blend it and open myself up to things that I don't understand and that I wanted to know more. And I took the time to do that, however long that was, because that was really uncomfortable for me, and it was scary for me. So I've lost a child in my perspective, and now I'm going to threaten the whole foundation that I'm relying upon, because that was the foundation at that moment that sustained me. If I get rid of that foundation, where am I going to be? The influence of others and their perspectives, thankfully, I continued immediately to put myself in the presence of people that could give me some different perspectives. That doesn't mean it was comfortable, but I allowed my mind to be open to other avenues. I will tell you that my Christian support system is not there anymore. But I have a huge family now that supports me, and a huge spiritual team that supports me.
Thank you. And I know this is a big question, and I know how many times I answer the phone for Suzanne, and someone is just desperate because their religion says you can't go to Suzanne and you can't get those answers. Are there others on the panel who would like to address the same question that you had to deal with coming from a belief system that didn't allow this?
They're handling the microphone like it's about to explode. I wonder if it has anything to do with the topic. And feel free to join in. I would imagine that our journey through this has been similar to a lot. It certainly similar to those in our local group here who refer to themselves as X something because the belief systems didn't overlap, or didn't overlap enough perhaps. I grew up Catholic, and then when we got married, we started going to Lutheran churches and Methodist churches and things like that. And I don't know that we ever truly grasped the tenets of each faith as much as we just viewed it as a community of faith and support. And I think anything faith-based that makes you a better person is a good place to be. We've been fortunate to travel the world, and as a ex-Catholic, as a Christian, you are brought up to believe a fairly narrow view of what's right. We had a very, very powerful spiritual experience in Varanasi, India, on a day before the 5th anniversary of his passing. Varanasi, India is to the Hindus as Rome is to the Catholics, as Mecca is to Islam, as Jerusalem is to the Jews. It's very powerful, and we happened to be there during a celebration that we did not understand. All of these ceremonies were going on, and we couldn't really understand what was going on, but we knew something powerful was happening. And before the ceremony, you're floating on the Ganges River, the Holy Mother River according to the Hindus, and you're viewing funeral pyres where people exhibiting joy are bringing their loved ones down to put them on the funeral pyre, to burn them and have their ashes immersed into the Ganges River, which is like your ticket to heaven. That's about as good as it can get if you're a Hindu. And we went through this ceremony, which was a very, very powerful, emotional evening that just totally drained us of all the strength. It's kind of like listening to Suzanne talk for like 6 hours. Imagine how you would feel if you had Suzanne, her undivided attention for 6 hours.
It was probably a low point in my life. I mean, not you, Suzanne. No. Not you, Suzanne. Being at the ceremony and just, seeing, it was Devin's anniversary. It had been an emotional day, watching the crematoriums, and there was just a lot going on.
The sun is setting,
Yeah.
bodies are burning. It's powerful stuff, and emotionally you do that. So we go back to the hotel that night, traveling through unbelievable poverty. And it's like, okay, we can leave now. We can catch the first flight out of Varanasi and
We're
go
done.
home.
We can't handle any more emotion. We are done.
Then the next day we get up, 5 o'clock in the morning, an hour before the sun rises. We go to exactly the same place. The bodies are still burning, but the sun is rising. And you see the pilgrims who have traveled hundreds or thousands of miles to be there, just like Islam, where you're expected to make the pilgrimage to Hajj one time a year. Same thing in Hindu. They're supposed to go to Varanasi. They're supposed to immerse themselves in the waters of the Ganges River to wash away a lifetime of sin. And to be there, to be standing on the banks of this incredibly polluted water and seeing these pilgrims with love and compassion and joy in their eyes, having the opportunity to go through this purification ceremony, struck me as like, how can I, as a member of one religion, say that these people are incorrect? I don't know, but I saw something special there that opened my mind to a greater possibility, that we can all believe different things and still all be right. Anything that makes us a better person is a good thing for everybody. Spread the love.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Shall we move on? Okay. Another question from the audience. We have a hand here.
My question is, I woke up this morning thinking that everything here just resonated with everything I believed right from the start. And I thought when I go home, I don't even know how to explain this to my it's not my responsibility to bring them to the other side or whatever.
Yeah.
But how can I use it? Like, what can I say to explain this experience?
Who would like to start with that?
I think it's really adorable
Repeat
because
the
I know
question.
that what you're asking is, how can you assure your friends and family that you haven't joined a cult? And one of the most important things about this group is that, first of all, when you get all of these incredible validations that you get from your children, realize that they're sacred and that you can't share them with everyone because not everyone's going to understand, and a lot of people are going to try to explain them away. So keep them to yourself and share them with people who are like-minded. Secondly, I've always said this ever since the start of this group, that the day that we have succeeded is the day that no one shows up for a meeting anywhere in the world. And the reason that that is because I want everyone to get it. So this is kind of a contrary to a cult. What we're trying to do is just help everyone understand that, first of all, when I say I don't want people showing up for meetings, I want you all to become friends and family. I want you to realize that we're all here for each other. And second of all, yes, I think that it's important to realize that what I'm saying is impossible because we have children passing all the time. And in our own group, we have so many people who come back all the time to help others. So once you've started on this journey and you see new members who arrive in the group, one of the most amazing things is to be able to reach out that hand, give that hand to that person, and pull them forward as well. Because we're all just walking each other home. And I hope that answers your question, but don't share this with people that you know aren't going to understand. At some time, they might understand, and that's great, but it's okay if they don't, because we do, and we'll always be there for you.
I want to add to that, but in a different way, because I don't want to run out of time without saying the one thing that I want to stress, and that is the sense of connection that I hope you come to experience with others who are on this same journey. This, to me, is the greatest gift that Susan's passing has given us. The point of the book is not, look at us, we're these jolly people that got to go on a sailboat cruise. It's, look at us, we were 4 couples who barely knew each other, who spent a week in close confines because of our kids who passed, who brought us together. And I wish you could have all been there. This is what I try to get through in the book. The love that was the love boat, right? There was not one.
He was a captain, I was a dinghy captain.
The dinghy captain. There really, truly was not one moment of angst, strife, cattiness, competition, nothing but a solid week of love, cooperation, sharing, and joy. It was nothing, it was like nothing any of us had ever experienced. Do you want to talk to that?
No, you do.
Okay. That's the point.
Okay, well,
Picture Gilligan's Island on the water. You know? We have the skipper. We know who Ginger was. Those of us that are old enough to remember that. Just jumping on what Suzanne said, hopefully you've gotten something really dramatic out of this meeting and meeting others that are following the same journey. I had unbelievable joy when I saw Irene reaching out, and she's an affiliate leader, and how she has brought so many more people and made their journey more comfortable. And you are all ambassadors. Now we're hoping you're ambassadors. And don't talk to the person that isn't, is thinking that it's a woo-woo or a cult. Go to the people that you think need that help and put out a hand, because you'd be surprised at the response that you'd get. They were waiting for someone to approach them. We've all had that experience, and we were fortunate that we came together. And I'll never forget our journey together, and hopefully we can do it again. But again, be an ambassador and reach out to a person, and I think it'll spread. And as Suzanne said, it's all about the love. You just love a person, don't judge them, and hopefully they won't judge you, and join the cult.
One, quickly?
One thing I would like to say, my other counterpart, my husband, is actually here, and this is the first time in 5 years that he's been to a meeting. So patience in those around. The best way that we can share what's happened to us is by the joy in our lives. And so I didn't need to convince my husband or my family or anybody else about anything. I just needed to show them. And because of who I am, it makes them go, what are you drinking? What are you smoking? So it makes them want to question what's happened to me. I want some of what you have.
Beautiful, thank you. Just to show you how the kids are orchestrating this whole thing, my very next question, if no one raised their hand, was, how do you deal with the non-believers? And I can just see the kids saying, we want to make sure they ask that question. Have that lady raise her hand. Oh, the time is going by, and I know you have many more questions. There's two areas I think are really important for us to address. They're like the practical stuff and how did you do it. And one is I'd like to address to the fathers. In this culture of men don't cry, men don't get emotional, how did you progress on the journey, and what was your support group? Who wants to start? Ty? Oh, Jeff.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, if men are not supposed to cry and get emotional, I failed right off the bat. We were fortunate. The old saying, you'd rather be lucky than good. We were lucky. I mean, we lived, when Devin passed, we lived in this community. And it was fairly short order before we were introduced to Mark and Susie Ireland, who's one of a current board member and a founder of the group. And Elizabeth lives in the neighborhood. And we found our people. And within those people, all of these groups, the males were very active. They believed, they were there. So right off the bat, I had a really good support group with a lot of the other fathers. And which brings me to the point that I've noticed all weekend long. I am shocked, pleased, but shocked to see the number of men here. You guys deserve a round of applause, because I know there's a fairly good chance that some of you came kicking and screaming, because 3 years ago I would have been there. But I'm hoping that if that was the case, that you actually got something out of this. And as Tony said, that you're now in a place where you can be an ambassador and help other fathers, because it's a great question. Not everybody has that male support. So now you guys are in a position to provide that support. So go forth and be strong.
Thank you. Tony?
I'm Greek, so I cry all the time. I told Irene when she approached me and said, Suzanne wants to have the panel discussion. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to relive, even when we were being interviewed, I didn't want to relive that time that I had Carly in my arms and her life just drained out of her. I still can't, do it. I'm going to start crying again. So, but there's nothing wrong with it. I find that, I see other fathers in here, and when I have those private conversations, they tear up. We tear up all the time, and I find nothing wrong with it. And in fact, it's an emotional release for me, and you shouldn't be ashamed of it.
Thank you, John. Cyril?
Okay, as you know, the French has always support the Greek people. It's my bow. No, sometimes for a man it's not easy to, because we have our family, we support our family, and we need to show that we are the rock of the family. But yeah, to cry it's normal. I cry a few times in the year. Before I didn't cry. But it's good. I feel good after. Because I am with my son. I have with my Elizabeth. I have and my two daughters. But I was not very involved at the beginning for meeting. No. Because I prefer to manage myself this situation, and Elizabeth has been for me very, very helpful, because it was not easy. It's not easy, of course. And you know what I say every time I am with someone who lost children? I say, you know, we don't lose the children. He's still with us. We have been lucky to have our kid when he was with us. Now he is with us on the other side, and it's good connection. And everybody don't understand that. I can say to you, because they say, "Oh, you are very strong." I say, "Okay, but I'm strong and I'm okay. I can sleep." I didn't see my son many times in a dream. I saw when we was in a boat together. I saw Morgan 3 times only. Elizabeth saw Morgan many times. Alex, something. Christine, something. But I'm okay with it. And I continue to go outside and to see my star, Morgan.
I just have to say, when he said that he doesn't see Morgan in dreams very often, the night that he did see Morgan and had an incredible experience with him, it was the night after that reading with Suzanne on the catamaran. So that was a huge, huge experience for him. And I just wanted to clarify what he was talking about on the boat.
Of course, it's not negative. No. If I don't see Morgan, I think about Morgan every time. But I have my connection. My connection is, for example, when I run, because I try to keep good shape. And sometimes it's not easy, and I say, "Morgan, please push me." And I start this song, "I believe I can fly."
Having been raised in a Catholic family and with a very German stepfather who was very stoic, and his background had been World War II in Korea, and having command of a company in Korea where he lost 2/3 of his men killed, and would never say a single word about his experiences. And I know there are probably guys who can relate to that, you know, whose fathers were like that. I was brought up not to show any emotion whatsoever. And of course, in the military, you know, you have a mission, and you know, people get hurt, people get killed completing a mission, and you get used to hearing or experiencing losses. So it's not until your own flesh and blood passes that it strikes you that this is something it's very hard to control. And I mean, we were on a phone in Croatia listening to the report from my son-in-law that Susan had died, and it was just crippling, you know, and I was basket case for weeks. Went back to work to keep occupied. But still, even this is now almost 12 years, we were watching a movie the other night called Taking Chance. So about a young Marine who had been killed in Iraq and brought home. I cried, you know.
I think that was the hardest thing for me because he was and is so strong. To see him crumple and sob and writing Susan's eulogy and sobbing was shattering. But again, it's the change that comes over you when you have that personal experience and know your loved ones are not gone forever. It's making new friendships that are so deep like this that changes everything. It's being allowed to cry and seeing how others have dealt with it that's been so helpful, so helpful.
Thank you. Sort of giving your permission to cry and show emotions and finding others like this where you can safely share your emotions. There's one other group, and we're right down, I guess, to the wire. We're done at 12? Is that, that sometimes they sort of get lost in the shuffle, and that's the siblings. So those of you who have another child or children in the family, and they've lost their brother or sister, how did you deal with that? How are they dealing with it? And do you have some advice?
I would love to say something about siblings because we do have a Helping Siblings Heal as well, and it hasn't grown enough because of the fact that siblings are the hardest people, the hardest grievers to be able to get to meetings because they feel that they have to heal us first before they can heal themselves, and a lot of times they stuff it down until later on. But I want to tell you that I have had a psychic medium come and speak to our siblings group here, and she's told me that she has been told by Spirit that there are at least 60% of all siblings who are intuitive. I think we all are, but I mean specifically very intuitive and who are actually communicating with their brothers and sisters in spirit. I know that both of my daughters have experienced this. It's not easy. It's not an easy road. But one of the things that we'd like to do with Helping Parents Heal as we move forward is to expand that group because it is such a great thing for siblings to be able to get together and talk about how crazy their parents are. What are we going to do with them? How are we going to deal with these people? And how are we going to help them? Because truly for them, they are a lot of times left out in the equation. But I know, and another thing is that we become helicopter parents once we have a child pass because then we're worried about the other ones as well. And I know that this is something that will be ongoing, but we do have a Helping Siblings Heal page for siblings to join, so please ask your kids to join it. And we'll be trying to organize more online meetings to be able to have them on those meetings as well. Did any? Yes.
So we do have a daughter. She's a year and a half younger than Devin. And in the beginning, she was getting her own signs, and I think that brought her some peace and comfort. And then she saw us going on to our own journey with this fabulous group here, and she couldn't find a sibling group. She turned 21 shortly after Devin died, and it's kind of a lost age. You know, there's things for the younger group, but by the time you get to this age, there was nothing at the time. This was before the sibling group was put out there. So she decided to escape her life, so she moved to Florida to work for Disney World. So, you know, what better place if you don't want to deal with reality? And she has since asked us not to tell her anything that's going on with our lives and about Devin and about our signs. So it's sad for us that we can't share this with her.
I have 3 other children, and my 2 boys are in their 30s, and they're both military, one Army, one Air Force, and it's been extremely, you add the mail process, and you compound it with the military process, and they haven't really found their way in how to process or reconcile the loss of their little brother. My daughter, who has the medium abilities, and she has since a child, which I didn't know until after Andy passed, and then she was talking to me about Andy, so that was interesting. I'll call her up, hey Beth, you know. But she's done really well. She's a nurse, and she has 3 kids, so I think the biggest thing I got from this conference, it's funny, I really had an aha moment this weekend about allowing the plan to play out, and that I'm not in charge of how my kids respond. They have their own perfect plan in this universe, their own spirit guides, their own process, and I have to trust in that and have faith that they will find their way.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. And I know you're bursting with more questions, and this is just the beginning, but the fact that you're in a group where you can ask the questions and share answers with each other is so much healing. So thank you for these brave parents who are willing to sit up here and share some very personal experiences and answers with you, and do that for each other. And like many people said, reach out the hand to someone else that you know needs that. And any other comments? Suzanne, it's your book. Do you?
I just want to thank this group for allowing me to share your kids, your stories, your journeys with everybody. The feedback has been tremendous, and I thank you all for joining us because you're part of the family. So thank you all.